Hey everyone, welcome to Honey, Do You Trust Me? I'm Dr. Pavini Moray. I'm the founder of Wilcelium, and we are a trans and queer-led online learning community teaching adults who long for love the skills that they need to have happy, loving, successful relationships that stand the test of time. And every month we offer a free teaching on a relevant topic. And today, our topic is trust. And so we're going to be talking about strategies of how to assess trust, how to assess trustworthiness in yourself and in your relationship, talking a little bit about risk, how you can learn to trust more deeply, and a whole lot more. So glad that you're here with us and looking forward to sharing space. And just to let you know that there'll be time for your questions and answers at the end. So stick around and you'll get my full attention and expertise on whatever you're curious about or bringing. This is participatory. It's helpful to me to know that I'm not teaching into a void, and it's helpful to you to participate and engage. So there are going to be several points during the teaching today where I ask you to type in the chat or to practice something or to take some notes, and that will just help your learning and integration. So go ahead and turn off all your devices, put your cell phone in a drawer, close your other browser tabs. This is a gift that you're giving yourself of attention and time. It's about an hour. And so getting to be present for this is something that you can give to yourself as you increase your adult level trust. And wanting to be really clear that the topic of trust is applicable in romantic partnerships, but also in friendship, in work relationship, in family relationships. Trust is important in all relationships. So let's talk a little bit about what it is. So a lot of times people think that trust is a feeling, right? I feel trust. And to a certain extent, that's true, but it's also not a feeling. It's a belief about someone based on your observations or what you have been told, right? And as evidence mounts that someone is indeed trustworthy, trust becomes a quality of a relationship. Some people are trustworthy, others are not, right? And so there's sometimes a conflation of feeling comfortable with feeling trusting. So we're going to disentangle that a little bit, because you can increase your capacity to feel trust, no matter what's happened to you in your past, by taking small calculated risks and having them be successful. And you can become resilient here with any trust wounds that you've encountered, any betrayal that you've experienced, right? So intimacy is really based on trust. It's a currency that relationships run on. And so, it's important to develop a capacity for it. And it's hard for so many people. It's hard for me, it's hard for you, it's hard for everybody on this webinar. We all struggle with it, right? And so Dr. Erik Erikson, he was a theorist of human development, right? He talked about how when a baby is born, the basic needs of a baby need to be met by its caregivers. It's completely vulnerable, right? And how well those needs are met really determine how that child will be essentially trusting or mistrusting of the world, right? And so your capacity to trust either is supported or diminished by your early care. But that is not a life sentence, right? You get to develop capacity for trust regardless of what's happened to you. So I want to go a little bit further into this, because I think a lot of times people think, oh, I have trust issues, like as if it's a personal failing, right? Somehow I'm broken because I have trust issues. And I want to give you a little bit more context for this so that you can have more compassion about it, right? So when early caregivers, if they don't show us acceptance, appreciation, acknowledgement, affection, if they don't allow us to be who we are, if they're not attuning to us more of the time than they are not attuning to us, right? if they're not allowing of our feelings, if there is abuse or neglect, if they have expectations that are too high or too low, if there is an atmosphere of argument in the home, right? If you have been used as a go-between, if you had parents who were separated and you were the go-between, if a caregiver had or has active addictions, right? These are all things that diminish trust in the world as a safe place, right? And then there is the concept of betrayal, right? And what is betrayal? Well, betrayal is on purpose. So it's all those things on purpose, right? Knowingly thwarting someone out of something that ought to occur, breaking a social contract. You knew that I felt that way and you still did that, and you did it on purpose in order to harm me, right? And when we have experiences of betrayal or rupture of trust, something that we are relying on from someone for some important aspect of our life, it's traumatic, right? This is relational trauma, and it can lodge in our bodies and it can affect our brain functioning long after the event, whatever the rupture of trust was, has occurred, right? One thing that can happen is that we become hypervigilant, we become untrusting, we look for lies, we become suspicious, we develop beliefs that the world is unsafe or no one can be trusted, right? And I mean, the thing is that betrayal happens. People hurt people on purpose sometimes, right? And you have been betrayed. You may in the future be betrayed again. You may have betrayed someone, right? And so this capacity for resilience after relational trauma, of not it being a life sentence to I can never trust again, right? That's a choice. And it doesn't always feel like a choice. Sometimes it just feels like, well, because the world is inherently unsafe, I can't trust. So we're going to talk a little bit about assessing trustworthiness. How do you know if someone is trustworthy? And because there's this connection, right, between how trustworthy someone is and how safe you feel with them, how much love you can give and receive with them. And so I want you to think right now, and this is one of those interactive moments, think right now of someone who you definitely love and who you know loves you back. And this person is someone who will stand by you no matter what. They like you, they love you, they will be there for you. They're not perfect, but just think about who this person is in your life and how you feel when you think about them. And then go ahead and put their name into the chat, just their first name. Mhm. Great. Yeah, and so just notice what that relationship has taken, the time it's taken to cultivate, the experiences that you've had, the ruptures and the repairs that you've made with them, the way that they have shown you that they're trustworthy without being perfect, right? Just consider all of that for a moment, because you actually already know how to assess for trustworthiness, right? And when someone shows up, and we're gonna talk about what the qualities are here in a second, when someone shows up as trustworthy, right? They are making their best pitch for your love. They're showing up and they're saying, here I am, I'm ready to give and receive love with you, I'm ready to share intimacy with you, right? And that quality of trust really enables the love. Sure, you can love people who you don't fully trust. It is indeed possible, but there's a part that holds back, right? And so really having the skill of assessing for trustworthiness is part of becoming an adult who loves, who has relationships. And I'm going to read you this quote by Sherilyn Kenyon. And what Sherilyn writes, everyone suffers at least one bad betrayal in their lifetime. It's what unites us. The trick is not to let it destroy your trust in others when that happens. Don't let them take that from you. So this is an important concept, right? That other people can be not trustworthy. They can be shitty. They can be betrayed on purpose, right? And you still get to be someone who trusts if you want, no matter what has happened. And there is such a value in being a soft and trusting heart, right? Of like, no matter what has happened to me, I am choosing that I get to be someone who is trusting, right? Who trusts others for the sake of my own intimacy. I get to do that, right? So adult trust, there's kind of that childlike trust that we all have broken at some point, where we're just like, it's almost like hero worship, right? Adoration, putting someone on a pedestal. Like that kind of trust is not adult trust. So there's childlike trust, there's adult trust. So we're going to talk about adult trust. And the foundation of adult trust is not, you will never hurt me, but rather, I trust myself with whatever happens. Okay. So because you want to be someone who shares intimacy, you get to be someone who practices trust, right? And discerning how you place your adult trust is a crucial part of this practice. So, and there's a spectrum of trustworthiness, right? I was in a friendship with someone, I'm still in a friendship with her, actually, and we were in some pretty hairy situations. We were held up at gunpoint. Lots of things happened, and we were living in a very violent part of the world at that time. And I trusted her with my life because we went through these situations where she showed up and was present, right? I would not trust her with my library books because she didn't have that set of skills to track, and I wouldn't be like, hey, can you take this book back to the library? So it's this adult trust considers that there's a spectrum, that people can be trustworthy in some areas and not in others, right? We don't expect perfection. As children, we do, but as adults, we know better, right? Everybody gets to be human. And so as an adult, you cultivate intelligent trust and intelligent mistrust. That there is a balance here, that that people have shortcomings. Sometimes they fail, sometimes they forget, right? Because the opposite of trust isn't actually mistrust. It's despair. If you can't trust anyone, it puts you into a position of incredible self-reliance and despair that the world can't show up to meet you, right? So adult trust is conditional. It's not this innocent, all trusting, right? We trust maybe, 80%, 85% out of 100%. Like with somebody who's like, we deeply trust, like it's not 100%, and we don't expect it to be. We can hold that people are human, right? And we still are in a process of when we have adult trust, we're still in a process of watching out for our own best interest at the same time, right? So there's the trust allows you to relax. It allows you to be yourself, bring your feelings, share, be vulnerable, be intimate, right? But it's not a blanket trust, because that's faith, is trusting without auditing. And we want to have adult trust. So we audit your relationships. You audit your relationships periodically. You have check-ins, right? You talk about what's working, what's not working. If there are breaches of trust or ruptures of trust, you talk about it, you heal it. It doesn't get swept under the rug. There are these moments of really being adults and letting people know their impact on you and being available to hear your impact on them as well, right? And so the beautiful thing about cultivating adult level trust, not expecting it to be 100%, is that you both become more trustworthy, you become more in your own integrity, and you also become more trusting towards another. And we're going to talk about how all that happens. So I'm curious, this is another moment for you to check in. How do you know if someone can be trusted? What are the signs and signals that you look for that let your heart relax? Go ahead and drop those into the chat. They do what they say they will do. They follow through. Yes. What else? Their words match their actions. They don't judge. They accept you. They're dedicated to their personal integrity. They have your back. You notice how they treat themselves and their own commitments. That's a big one. Intuition. You trust your gut here. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to just talk a little bit. And there's a great book by David Rico, who's a Buddhist and a relationship teacher, called Daring to Trust. And so what I'm about to share with you is based on his work of how you can know if someone can be trusted and all the things that you said in the chat. So this person shows integrity. They strive to live in accord with their standards of fairness and honesty in all of their dealings. They're not necessarily perfect at it. They may operate on the basis of self-interest, but not at the expense of others. They don't retaliate. This is a big one. They don't use the silent treatment. They don't resort to violence. They don't hold a grudge. They reliably show you affection, allowing, acknowledgement, appreciation, attention, right? They support you when you need them to. They keep their agreements. They don't have a secret life. They don't lie. They genuinely care about you. They stand by you and they stand up for you. And then the insides of them and the outsides of them, that thing about their words and their actions aligning, they're pretty much in alignment, right? If you vocalize boundaries, they respect those boundaries. They don't jump in to fix your problems, right? They're not a savior, but they listen to you. And if you ask for it, they will offer their advice. They don't give up on you. And they're more committed to the honesty in the relationship than they are to being right? So those are just baselines of trustworthiness. And so when you think about it, if you have a partner or if you're in a relationship, even with a friend, are those baselines of how to assess trustworthiness, are they met? And if they're not, maybe that's a conversation to have. Maybe like we said, people can be trustworthy in some areas and not in others. And so maybe like everything is great with your best friend, but as soon as you start to share a hard thing, they're like, oh, let me help you fix that, right? And so it doesn't mean that they're not trustworthy. How do they respond when you bring that to them, right? When you're like, oh, I noticed that every time I bring a hard thing to you, you jump in, you try and fix it. Are you willing to talk about this and to maybe think about how we could do this differently? Right? And if they're like, oh yeah, totally, let's talk about that. That indicates trustworthiness. It's like, we don't expect people are like completely ticking off all the things on this list. And we do expect that if you bring something to someone who you're in intimate relationship with, that they're responsive to that thing. That indicates that they're trustworthy, right? So there's trusting others, and then there's trusting ourselves, right? And I'm curious if you would just put into the chat, what is a way that in relationship you don't yet trust yourself? I don't trust myself to pick people whom I can heal with. What else? Do I have a poor picker? Do I compromise for the sake of connection? I don't trust myself to know what I'm feeling. Sometimes I believe other people's criticisms too deeply. I don't trust the ways I know myself. When I'm triggered, my tendency is to retaliate or to conceal. Will I ever be able to give that person my unconditional love? Yeah. Yeah. And so part of becoming a trusting heart, right, is building this trust with yourself and healing the place in yourself that um, doesn't yet trust yourself, doesn't trust your picker, right? Because it's important, it really matters, right? And there are so many reasons why you wouldn't trust yourself, right? Things have happened. You have misjudged, or there has been a slow reveal in someone that you've chosen, and then suddenly you never know what you're getting in there with, and you get in there and you're like, oh my gosh, wow, that wasn't what I thought, right? You have ignored your intuition. You have pushed through your boundaries, right? These are all things that we all do, first of all, and we all do them for the sake of connection and belonging. And like everything, they have costs and benefits, right? Maybe it's a short-term win. Oh, I got to be with this person, but in the long term, you're like, oh, the impact of that is that I think that my picker is broken, right? And this is it's just so common. How would it be to reframe around this? To consider that everyone you've picked, you've learned something from, right? And you could make a list of those things if you wanted. And uh, sometimes it's just like, oh, well, I'm not going to do that again, right? And I think that there's something about self-forgiveness here as well. Of what do I need to forgive myself for? There was something important that I needed to learn from that relationship, or there was something, some pattern that I needed to see. I had a client years ago who told me that they always got into relationship with alcoholics, and we were working on that. And then they had a realization, oh, my parent was an alcoholic. Oh, and kind of once that realization was in place, they didn't need to repeat that pattern. So it wasn't that their picker was broken, is that there was some core healing that had to happen around that pattern. Right. And so they were continually picking people who reflected that pattern so that that thing could come to the surface and heal. And I think that this starting to root into my picker is not broken. I am picking people who are teaching me painful lessons, perhaps. And can I start to trust that a little bit more, right? And are there patterns that I need to look at so that I don't have to repeat these painful patterns anymore? So, as you start to be in this practice of trust, which we're going to talk about, you develop the capacity to trust more. You start to believe also that you're going to behave with more honesty and integrity, right? So if you have that retaliatory urge, you know that you are working on it in therapy, for example, right? And so that you start to have that urge, and when you're faced with it in the relationship, in the situation, you want to lash out and retaliate, you're like, I want to and I'm not going to, because I am choosing to be safe with myself. I'm choosing to be in integrity with myself. I'm choosing to be trustworthy with myself, I'm choosing to trust myself that I can work with that impulse, right? I can tend to the hurt that I have without externalizing it, right? And you become willing to work on ruptures that have occurred in trust in your relationships instead of just abandoning them and starting a new relationship. You're like, no, let's actually work through this, and here's the impact that we need to address, right? So that constant vigilance of, can I trust this person? Can I trust myself? Right? That's often absent. It starts to come in with practice over time, right? So we're, like we just said, everybody's on a spectrum of trustworthiness. And I'm going to invite you into checking in with your own self-trust right now. And I'm going to say a bunch of statements, and I'm just going to ask you to make note of anything that strikes you, right? And if it doesn't strike you, don't worry about it. And then we'll check in at the end of what did you notice, okay? So grab something you can write with. Could be paper and pen, could be your device, whatever. Just inviting your attention to come towards your inner world, your inner experience. And close your eyes if you want, you don't have to. Okay. And just being okay if anything comes up here, telling yourself that you'll make space to attend to that today at some point. I trust my body. I honor my needs. I maintain my boundaries. If I have to break oaths or promises, I do it with integrity. I trust my integrity. I trust my intuition. And just taking a moment here to make any notes. So as you're considering your relationship with trusting yourself and just noticing how these questions land, what's coming up? What are you noticing? I trust my integrity with others more than I do myself. Like, you'll show up for others better than you show up for yourself. I'm guessing that's what that means. Yeah. Okay. What else? I don't trust my ability to honor my own needs in relationship to others. Huge. Yeah. To prioritize the needs of others before your own needs. Yes, this is a way that we have learned to create connection, right? And it has a lot of costs. I don't always maintain my boundaries. I'm inconsistent. Mhm. I trust my body. I don't feel shame for whom or what I desire. Yeah, good. So, as I said, others are on a spectrum of trustworthiness, as are we, right? And you get to decide. You get to decide, where do I want to bolster uh, being a safe partner, being a safe friend? Where do I want to bolster being a safe partner with myself, right? Because the relearning of trust, or learning it for the first time, is about that. It's about trusting others as well as trusting yourself. And I would say maybe trusting yourself is um, the bigger priority, right? Um, because it can be like, well, gosh, I was supposed to learn that as a baby and I didn't. And how am I ever supposed to learn it now? How is it even possible? Um, but I can tell you that with practice, it does, right? Because I told you, you take these small calculated risks, right? And then you check in and you see, was that successful? I asked them to take back my library books. Did they do it? They said that they would be available around noon. Were they? You're auditing, you're checking it, right? And you're consciously doing that as a practice of allowing yourself to do it, and not in a like suspicious, looking for betrayal kind of way, but just in a like, I'm giving myself permission to track for trustworthiness, right? Um, Trusting your resilience to recover your own trust after betrayal, right? I am not worthy. I mean, I'm not willing to not ever be a trusting human again because I have been betrayed. Like, that just seems like too high of a price to pay. Just because there are people who are untrustworthy does not mean I don't get to trust, right? And so that resilience, you start to trust that with practice, right? And I'm just going to give you an example of, like, as a parent. So I'm a parent. I have two teenagers. And I reflect on my own behavior as a child as I'm parenting, right? As to guide my parenting. And so as a kid, there were a lot of times when my need for autonomy and freedom outweighed my integrity, right? So I was duplicitous. I lied all the time. I was sneaking around. I had goals of fun, freedom, and friends, and I wasn't trustworthy. I wasn't a trustworthy kid, and that eroded my sense of trust in myself. And so now, as a parent, I choose to be exquisitely trustworthy. I don't lie to my kids. I am honest, I am integrous, I have direct conversations with them about sex, drugs, alcohol, smoking, friends, all the things, right? And so that practice of choosing to be trustworthy as a parent, even though I wasn't as a teen, has restored that trust in myself, right? But that's been many, many decisions of, like, every time, your kid comes to you and they're like, so what was the first time you took LSD like? And you're like, I don't want to talk about that. It's like the decision to lean into being trustworthy has really helped in terms of my own self-trust, right? And so this means that you get to choose this as well. You get to be impeccably trustworthy. You get to be safe as a partner, as a friend. And that means that you get to learn to be really clear with your boundaries, right? And you get to learn, if you say yes or no, and then you change your mind, you get to talk about that instead of just like flaking or not talking about it. You get to step away from blame and just own your side of the street, right? And so, as I'm saying to you, that, like, as you do these things, becoming more trustworthy, your capacity to trust increases, right? Because you're signaling to yourself, hey, there are trustworthy people in the world because I'm one of them. And then you begin to believe that there's others too, right? So let's talk a little bit about how. how do we do this, right? Because I'm saying that it's a choice, that it's a practice. It's not a monolith. It's not something that you have and it's forever. It has to be tended, right? You have to continue to be trustworthy, and your friends and partners have to continue to be trustworthy. And then you have to repair when there's breaks in that trust. So if you decide that you want to develop your skill as a trustworthy and trusting human, if you do not want to pay the price anymore for others' untrustworthiness, here's the thing that you do. And it looks like this. So in relationship, you get triggered, right? You get suspicious, you get vigilant. They didn't come home when they said they were going to. They said that they were going to do this and then they didn't. You have this sneaking suspicion that they're not giving you all the information. You are feeling guarded or on edge, and you're just like, what's going on with my partner or my person? Like, you know, something has grabbed you on the inside, whether it's your intuition or whether it's through your betrayal lens, who knows? It doesn't actually matter that much. You're triggered. And as you become somatically triggered, right, your nervous system activates, your brain starts dropping all those fear hormones, and you know, your eyes get really big, right? That all happens, right? And then you start to create narratives that make sense of that physiological somatic experience that you're having. And you're running narratives in your head like, they don't really love me, or they're so selfish, or they don't even care what I want. They only think of themselves, right? All the things that we say about other people when we get triggered, or that one, I picked the wrong person. My picker's broken, right? We can turn it on ourselves, same way. You notice that you're activated, that your nervous system is flooded, that you're angry, that you're suspicious, you're afraid, that all those thoughts and sensations and stories are going, right? And I'm like, raise your hand if you've ever had this experience, and everybody puts up 2 hands, right? Because it just happens. We just get triggered in a relationship. We're going to. We've all had relational trauma, and now we're trying to love again. We're in love for the first time, and it's like, oh my God, right? So you're activated. So here's where the practice of trust comes in. I'm activated. I want to blame my partner. I want to judge my partner. I want to mistrust my partner. Practice trusting my choice. The best for me. Ooh, it does not feel like that. No, 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 no. I know they are selfish. That I am going to practice trust right now. I hear all those voices, and I'm going to practice trust right now. I am trusting that I picked someone who is good for me. Imperfectly, humanly good for me. Right? That's the practice. When you do this, if you choose to do this practice, you will notice great internal conflict. The parts of you that want to stay with the vigilance, the betrayal, the feelings, the narratives, those parts are really strong and really loud, and they're really right, and they're really righteous, right? And they're certain, right? And they're old, often, old childlike parts. And so that part that feels so compelling, right? It's just so easy to go down that road, and you're trying to like wrench your attention away from that. I choose trust, right? I am choosing to steer the ship towards adult trust. Well, maybe they are imperfect, but they are not a monster. Maybe they didn't tell me all the things, but maybe they just forgot. Maybe they're not here right now, but I know that they will show up later, right? And so that, all of that, it's like there's this train going, and it's all going in this direction, and you get to choose a different neural pathway. And it doesn't feel great, especially in the beginning. It feels like you are lying to yourself, that you were going to be significantly and seriously wounded through this practice. I'll tell you a story. I was in a partner therapy session with her partner's therapist, and who I trust a lot, probably more than anyone else in my life. And my partner, we were talking about something that happened in the partnership, and my partner was like, "That's not how it is. That's not what happened. That is your story of what happened. That is not my story of what happened." And everything in me was like, "No, it's true," right? My partners, or the therapist, the couples counselor, was like, "Pavini, I want you to consider that you could be viewing this through your betrayal lens right now." And I was like, "No," but because I trust my therapist so much, I was like, okay, two people who I really, really trust are telling me that how I'm seeing the situation isn't accurate. I am so activated, I'm not able to make an accurate assessment about my reality right now. And that's intense, right? As a trauma survivor, you know how intense that is, right? Because that's, trauma, that's what it does, is make you mistrust your reality, right? And so to choose to put faith in two humans who I deeply trust, and to consider the possibility that I could just be in a trigger, and that I might not be seeing accurately, was huge. And that's adult trust, right? That's taking in more information than is just coming from your nervous system in a triggered state, right? And I do trust that my partner shows up anytime rupture happens. Ari shows up, right? And so even though your nervous system might be freaking out and sending all kinds of messages, red alerts, if you have established that your partner shows up after trust ruptures, it's difficult, but you can call that to mind, right? And you can tell yourself things like, well, their timeline for disclosing things is different than mine. They think differently than I do. I know they want the best for me, right? Because safe doesn't mean perfect, right? And safe does not mean perfect. So I can have a safe partner who is imperfect, right? And so when this practice happens again and again on repeat, it becomes easier to trust that even though they might be seriously fucking up right now, that they are not intentionally harming or betraying you, right? And this takes time to build with somebody. And it takes, I would say it takes a commitment. I mean, it's you're developing your trust for the sake of you, right? But it does take a commitment from both people, because it's so vulnerable to risk, to risk in those moments when we're deeply triggered, to risk trusting in those moments. I mean, it's completely transformative, but it's also a lot of risk, right? Because you're trusting your picker in that moment, right? You're saying like, I don't, this is not how it feels in this moment, but I'm going to call on the rational parts of my brain that are very, very hard to access right now because I'm so triggered. And I'm going to choose to believe that part of me, right? I'm trusting my picker, right? And this is so good. This is so good when we start to trust our own choice, right? Because it means that you're able to receive love, right? From yourself, from your partner, able to share your love. It's really the thing that is what enables relationship to be sustainable, transformative, and grow over time, right? We want to be in these relationship containers that are taking us places, that are helping us heal, that are helping us grow, right? And it's this level of practice that is so hard and so healing, right? So that's the big tool is lead. And it sounds so simple, like just lean into the trust. And I know it's not, I know it from personal experience, and I know it from watching tons of clients. Like it's really, really hard to choose it. And you get to, if you want it, you get to be this, you get to have this soft heart. I want that for you. So we're going to pivot to your questions in just a minute. But I have a couple of things that I want to tell you about. Our webinar next month is, let me tell you what it's on. Oh yeah, how to not take it personally. So also tools for happy partnerships, how to not take it personally. And we'll be giving you practical advice for how to do that in your relationships, all of them, not just your romantic ones. And I want to invite you, if you are in a partnership, to consider thinking about the Well Couple course, which is starting in January 2022. So we'll have a new cohort starting in January. It is for couples who are ready and willing to show up and learn together how to be trustworthy, how to be trusting, right? To work really through the issues that are plaguing your relationship, to deepen into friendship and intimacy and skill, of how do we do this in a skillful way? How do we use relationship as a path of personal healing, personal transformation, right? And this is all within a really great container of community support. So there's others doing it with you, which is, I think, the secret sauce, that we're not alone in it. We get to see how other people show up and are navigating their relationships, and that we're not the only ones. So if you have been wanting to do couples work with me, this is the way to do it. I'm looking for folks who have been in relationship for 2+ years and who have gone through some hard stuff, and weathered that, still love each other, maybe not so sure about the relationship right now, that's fine. So, and the next step is that I'm going to put this into the chat right now. You fill out an application, just basically answering the questions that I just told you. And then if I think I can help, we get in touch, and then we hop on the phone and we talk with you and your partner about what it would look like to have a transformed relationship, to have a thriving couplehood where people feel like they have boundaries and are respected, and that there's love and sovereignty and intimacy that doesn't have those high costs anymore, right? So your next step, if you want, is to just copy what I just put into the chat, and you can open it in a browser window. And then when we're done here, fill that out, and I'll be in touch shortly if I think I can help. It is a curated cohort of all the people in it will be really awesome and supportive. So, all right. So the time that we have now, we have about 12 minutes, and it's for your questions. And really, what do you want to know about trust that I can support you with? And I'll give you all my attention and my best shot at it. So go ahead and drop those into the either the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get to them. Okay. I'm trying to understand the web of trust and how it fits into control and fear. Something in my brain feels muddled by this, wondering if you can shed some light on how you see these coming together. Yeah. I mean, control is the strategy that we use when we are afraid, right? We get tight, we get anxious, we get controlling, and it's because we're afraid. And typically what we're afraid of is being hurt, right? We're afraid of sensations and emotions in our body that do not feel delightful. And so we guard, right? And we all have strategies. Some people get avoidant, some people get super controlling, some people disappear into themselves, they shut down, right? We all have these strategies in relationship to manage the flood of sensations and emotions that are happening inside of us. And so control is one of them. And I think about like, okay, well, the opposite of control is not actually out of control, right? It feels like it might be, but it's actually not. The opposite of control is vulnerability. It's where we're leaning in with trust and saying the things that are really hard to say, sharing parts of us that are really hard to share. and allowing ourselves to be the way we are, allowing for our own feelings, and allowing for the feelings of our friend or partner, with who, you know, the fear has been catalyzed in some way, right? And it's usually like it's fear of hurt, or it's fear of loss, fear of future grief, right? That there are these, at least in my experience, there are these kind of stepping stones down into deeper and deeper connection, deeper and deeper intimacy. And as we're doing those different levels, right, at each one of them, the fear can come up, right? And it's just something to be navigated, and it's something to be navigated as honestly as possible, right? If we can say, oh, I notice I'm feeling really afraid right now. I was recently with a friend in a situation, and I knew that they were feeling really afraid of the activity that we were doing, but they couldn't name it, right? And so they just got really controlling instead, and micromanaging, and it was painful, because it was like, oh, honey, like, just tell me you're afraid, and let's just talk about that, and like, I can support you in like what would feel better, right? And so but we're often really afraid to share what's real, right? What's true for us, and to admit, like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling clingy. I'm feeling like you're gonna leave me. Like, I know that this isn't about you, and so we're really afraid to say those things because we don't want to reveal, our messy insides. And but I think that that's the way through, is that vulnerability of like really naming the thing, and allowing not the person to fix it, but them to just know where we're at, and and to acknowledge our own impulse and desire to control. Like, I'm feeling really controlling right now. I really want to control, and if you have a partner with whom you have that kind of intimacy, they can be like, totally, you totally want to control right now. Yes, let me validate your impulse to control. Like, it makes total sense that you want to control right now. And anything in particular you want to control? What do you want to micromanage? And it can just become this a space where it's more intimate, right? But we have to be willing to be honest about what's actually happening. I hope that's helpful. Okay, next question. Scarcity mentality and saying no to something not quite right now, and trusting that there will come an opportunity to say yes. Oh, I love this. Yeah. When we compromise because we're afraid, like FOMO, right? We're afraid we'll never have that thing again. And so it's not quite the right thing, but I bought a house like this once, y'all. That's a pretty big one, right? Of like, oh, well, I'm not going to find another house. Like, this is good enough, right? Don't do that. It's like, all right, how do I tend to myself when I notice that contraction, right? Because scarcity mentality, it's like a contraction in our brain, but it also lives in our bodies. And can I notice it? Can I name it to myself? Oh, you're feeling really afraid of saying no to this opportunity because you're afraid it won't come again. And you're noticing that you just might want to compromise, and you can totally do that if you want. And I just want to remind you that there's bountiful goodness available. And if not this, something better will happen. And, it's okay to say no, just gentling yourself, kind of coaching yourself through it. Okay. My partner repeatedly betrayed my trust last year, so I have historical data to draw on that leads me to not trust them. It's not just that I have trust issues. I know I can practice the tools you've shared today, but I wonder if you have any tips about pushing through that kind of issue. Yeah, thank you for this question. I mean, I think if your trust has been betrayed, well, I mean, I guess I have questions. One question is speaking as someone with a betrayal filter, is the betrayal something that you both agree about, right? Did your partner say, I'm going to do this, and then not do that? Or does it just, and I'm not trying to gaslight you at all, but I think that I personally, from experience, know that often I experience betrayal when there hasn't been betrayal. So that's one level, but let's take it as it's written. And you have experienced betrayal multiple times. I mean, I think I wonder what what support y'all are getting together, how your partner is showing up to the process to repair. Breaches of trust are inevitable on many levels, but there's ones that are like sometimes it's just too much, and sometimes we can get past it and we can use it to develop closeness and talk more about needs and feelings and be more honest and more truthful with each other. And sometimes there's betrayals where you're just like, you know what, I know that I don't think I'm going to be able to get past this, or I don't think you're going to be able to get past this, and so therefore is it time for us to think about parting ways, and I don't know what your situation is in terms of this question, but I don't think there's a way to push through, I think there's a way to show up again and again, to get couples counseling and to be really honest, and there's a way to do that, and see if you can find your way through it together. But I don't think you can like just push through and be like, okay, well, I don't trust my partner, so I'm just going to be in this relationship and not trust, because that's just such a it's just a high cost for you. I don't think that that's probably what you want for yourself, even if you really love this person. They might not. I worked with a couple once who one of the partners, their strategy was lying, and they lied all the time to their partner. And I mean, and they were showing up to therapy, and they were both like really clear that this was a problem, and the person just couldn't stop lying, and said that they were kind of interested in doing that, but then didn't, and we just couldn't. We worked on it for like 6 months. We couldn't get any traction on the lying, because the lying was so ingrained as a strategy, So I think that's something to consider if you're trying and you're showing up and you're making changes and you see that in your partner's behavior. That's one thing, but if that's not happening, yeah, just lots of tenderness and care about that. Okay. Yeah, good. Yeah, good. I'm glad that was helpful. All right, folks. So again, there's that. So you can copy and paste that and put it in your browser. And if you're in a partnership and you want to work together, that'd be great. I'd love to work with you. We all have such great questions and such great heart to show up and think about these things, and just really appreciating the courage that it takes to to really look at this stuff. So grateful for your attention and time today. I'm Dr. Pavini Moray for Wilcilium, and hopefully I'll see you next month. And until then, may you have breath and pleasure.